Greetings, humanoids of the internets! My name is Bob, and this is not an episode of Journey into Space. I was about to say that, though. I was about to say this is episode 52 of Journey into Space, or 51, whatever it is. It actually is not. This is actually my Mun landing tutorial. I'm sort of following up on my previous two tutorials, which if you haven't seen yet, I would recommend you watch those two tutorials first. The first was my rocket building design tutorial, and the second one was my orbital maneuver, rendezvous, and docking tutorial. Now you probably won't need the rendezvous stuff for this, but it would be good for you to go ahead and watch that first anyway. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to get to the Mun. We'll just use test. Okay, the first thing you need to think about when you're about to go to the moon is your Mun lander. The moon, moon, whatever. Let's take a look at the lander that they give you as a default here. Okay, so it's not bad. I wouldn't use it myself, but it's not bad. One thing, the arrangement of all these RCS ports is very chaotic. Not too great. Also, here's a question. Why wouldn't they have put the landing legs out here somewhere? I don't see any particularly good reason why they wouldn't have. Now, why would you do that? That's because the wider your stance when you go to land on the moon, the better off you're going to be. They also haven't reinforced this at all. So let's go ahead and ditch this. We'll create a new vehicle. We are going to use this kind of command pod. Okay. Things you want to be thinking about as far as a moon lander go is one, your controllability when you're flying around, and two, how low your center of gravity is, how wide your leg stance is compared to the height of your vehicle. Let's do something right quick. Let's just stop this. New. We'll pick this. I'll just build a quick lander right quick. The kind of lander you should never actually build. Although I've done it before. In my series, a cheapo space program, I was kind of forced at one point to make a very tall, spindly lander. Okay. Okay. Now, what is wrong with this lander? What is wrong with this lander? I mean, aside from it doesn't have a ladder. We're not dealing with that, actually. I'll pop a ladder on there. Okay, it has a ladder now. Alright, what is wrong with this? Now, fudge. Now, what is wrong with this lander? Okay, where is the center of balance on this lander? It's right in the middle. So that means, and how far out do the legs spread on this thing? They spread out to about right here, right? So that means that you're landing on a spot that's maybe twice the width of the rocket, but the rocket's height is like 4 or 5 times as tall as the rocket is wide. The center balance is way up here. It's going to be very easy for you to lose control, and you don't have a very wide landing leg stance. So this is a bad moon rocket design. It doesn't mean it won't work. Now you can land a rocket like this on the moon, and I have, but it's a bad idea. All right, so let's go back to designing our moon lander, and you really sort of have to think about designing your lander first. Just take a while, just working on your lander, because what you're doing with your lander is going to dictate what you're going to do with everything else. If it's a great big lander, you're going to need to have a fairly big rocket to launch it. Okay, right there. It's not going to dock with anything. I always put a light source on the docking port I have. I don't even need the docking port, honestly. But you may use this. You may use your design later on to dock with something, in which case you'll want to have a docking port and a light to let it dock. So here's your basic capsule. A capsule, battery, advanced SAS, which is very important. As a matter of fact, I think I'll go with the big wide advanced SAS. Let's see. Okay, big wide decoupler. Big wide SAS. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. Good God. Okay, so we're going to want to have our legs, our landing legs, as far out as we can, and have our center of balance as low as we can. Okay, that's our sort of main tank. Sort of the main propulsion, I'm going to stick one of these vectoring engines on it. Okay. Now the problem with this design, of course, is well, the center balance is reasonably low, but let's go stick some landing legs on them. Might not reach the ground. No, actually, this probably would reach the ground. So you could say, sort of basically, this would be a very simple moon lander. It's not the one I'm going to go with, but it would be basically sort of what you would need. I would actually like to have a much wider stance in this. Okay. Okay. Structural. And that's sort of blocking. No, it's not. It'll be okay. Let me check and see if I can drop a ladder. Now, if you're landing on a body that doesn't have much gravity, you really don't even need a ladder. If you're going to land somewhere with a heavier gravity, like I don't know, Lethe or Tylo, you're probably going to need to have a ladder. It's good form just in general to have a ladder. Okay. Let's see if I can re-navigate that. That's better. Okay, so we got decouplers. Alright, we got these 4 external fuel tanks and 4 landing legs. Now, as you'll see, the width of our landing stance is going to be at least equal to the height of the overall rocket, and that's a good thing. That's what you want. That's what you want to have. Okay. And actually, I'm going to slap that there. Slap that there, because I'm going to want to have some RCS. I like to go with a pretty fair amount of RCS. It's not necessarily necessary, depending on what your design is. You may have a design where it's absolutely necessary to have a whole freaking ton of RCS, but it's not. If you have a good design, it's not absolutely necessary. But I do like to have. Oh no. Control Z reverts to whatever it undoes. It undoes whatever it is you just did. But I do have a problem here, which is these things are blocking where I would want to put the RCS ports, and that's sort of a major issue with landers too, is getting everything in the requisite space. Now, placement of RCS thrusters. In most cases, unless you have a really large vehicle, for something like this, a lander, having one set of 4 RCS thrusters is probably all you're going to need. And you should have that one set centered right on the center of balance. This is the button, the center of mass. This is the button that shows you where the center of mass is. So one set of 4 RCS thrusters right at where the center of mass is. Now we do have a problem, which is now this might interfere. But the good thing about these RCS ports is, generally speaking, they don't interfere that much with whatever else is going to attach. So, okay. Now we got a lander. We're going to need to connect these tanks up with the main tank. That's the easy thing. Now, what's the benefit of having these things out on a decoupler, aside from the fact that you're putting your landing legs further out, out sideways? The advantage is, okay, so I'm taking off from the moon here. I'm lifting off. These tanks are either dry when I land, or they become dry shortly thereafter. I drop them off, I lose the tanks, I lose the landing legs, I lose that weight. So this engine is not having to carry that weight. So that's a good thing. I could even do an asparagus staging with this, but that's kind of going overboard. Okay, so I have my basic lander. Center of balance is right here. So that's a pretty good stable landing scenario. So let's say the tips of the I think you can see my cursor. Let's say the tips of the landing legs are out here. The center of mass is right there. That's sort of a pyramid shape. That's going to be an intrinsically pretty stable situation. Now what you do need to probably think about is, let's suppose we come down a little bit hard. We want to make sure that these things are not going to detach, because if they do detach, you've got a failed mission. So I'm pretty generous with the struts, because that's one of the things where I figure better to be putting a few more struts on it than you need, rather than to have a failed mission. So we're going to put 4 connecting struts on each of these things to hold it on to the lander better. Now these decouplers are pretty strong. They should be able to take the load. They probably would be able to take the load even if I didn't have those reinforcing struts on. But that's another. I sort of build like the Germans or something. You know, it has to be like strong like a tank. You know, so that even if something bad, really bad happens, you have the best possible chance of your guys surviving. And that's a good thing. Okay, now not everybody really cares about this. I personally like to have some light on the subject, especially useful when you're landing, if you're landing somewhere where it's not quite daytime. So we'll pop some lights on here. Okay. Now, with this kind of capsule design, it really shouldn't be necessary. But I very often like to put some sort of visual aid on the capsule, something that will tell me this is the top. I'm looking at the top of the space. I guess it's technically not the top. It's what I think of as the top anyway. So let's say if you're descending, what you see here, if you're looking at it from this end, what you see here is going to connect up pretty well with what you see on a nav ball. If you're looking at it this way, it's going to be totally opposite. So I mean, let's say you're descending, and you can see from the from your environment that you need to tilt the spacecraft left. You don't have to think about it. You just do your left rotation key and you're good. Whereas if you're going something like this, say, oh, which way is left or which way is left, and you totally screw up and crash. Okay. Now there's two kinds of stability I'm talking about when it comes to landers. The first one is landing. What I've been talking about up to this point is landing stability. Basically, how wide your landing leg stance is, and how low your center of balance is, center of mass is. And so you can see that according to that criteria, this works fine. There's another form of stability, which is positional stability. How could if you're coming in towards the moon at a high rate of speed, and you need to be able to place the spacecraft exactly the way you want it to as quickly as possible with as much control as possible, that's the other kind of stability I'm talking about. Now, generally speaking, if you have RCS and the advanced SAS, and your spacecraft is not sort of a weird design, you're probably going to be okay. But there's many times where I've seen people who completely lose control of their spacecraft right before they're about to land / hit the surface. So that's not something you want to ever have happen. You want to make sure that as you're descending towards the ground, that you have absolute control of the spacecraft at all times. And as a matter of fact, unless you're actually making a maneuver at that moment, you should have the SAS on all the time. That way, your ship is not drifting around or doing something weird while you're trying to land on the moon. That's not a good thing. So for any moon lander you're going to make, you really need to have an advanced SAS module, and you need to have it on unless you're actually maneuvering at that moment. So that's good things to remember. Okay, so this craft at this point has basically everything that we need for a lander. It has an SAS. It has RCS for if you need to make a sort of drastic control move, or if your craft is not responding as fast as you need it to. You've got the RCS. I wouldn't use the RCS unless you actually need it. So you just got to get in the habit of popping into RCS and back out, whenever you need that extra power. It's got a ladder. It's got fuel. It's got landing legs, and all that is in a stable formation. So now you got to figure out how big of a rocket do I need to get this biatch up. And you're probably going to need to have a relatively large vehicle. Okay. Now, problem with what I did here, which is using the small vectoring engine, it's not a problem of power. It should have plenty of power to land, but it's going from 2 meters to 1 meter to back to 2 meters probably. Well, no, that's wrong. So when you do that, you need to add a little extra stability, or it's going to get very, very wobbly. So we're going to put a bunch of struts here to make sure that this thing does not get wobbly. And you may have to fiddle around with it a little bit. Okay. And we're going to put even more than that. Oh, one more thing that the lander needs. It actually says it has a command module. It doesn't really all that badly need it, but you're going to need to have power to run the lights and stuff. So Let's go ahead and pop on a couple solar panels. Yeah, we don't need that much. Now, if this is a robotic spacecraft, having a power system, some way of generating power and a battery, is absolutely required, because once your battery on the robotic module runs out, your spacecraft's going to die, and you will never be able to get it back again. So also one reason, let's pretend for a minute this is actually a robotic spacecraft. If you're building a robotic spacecraft, always put at least one of these on. Now, why do you want to do that? Okay, so let's say you've forgotten to deploy your solar panels on your robotic spacecraft. This is obviously a manned spacecraft, but we're pretending for the moment. Let's suppose you've forgotten to deploy your solar panels on your robotic spacecraft, and you suddenly find out that, oh, your spacecraft is totally dead. Now, if you don't have one of these on here, or you could also go with one of these radioisotope generators, but then the situation wouldn't occur. But I'm talking about if you have one of these things on your robotic spacecraft, you don't have to worry about it, because that's going to run day and night regardless. But if you're using solar panels, which are much more weight efficient, you're going to need to have at least one of these on here, so that when your spacecraft goes dead because you've forgotten to deploy your solar panels, when it turns around and this hits the light, it'll actually recharge your batteries and be up and running again. So that's something that you should bear in mind if you're making a robotic spacecraft. But that's neither here nor there right now. That's totally actually irrelevant to what we're doing right now. Okay. So what we're doing here is this is designed to descend to the moon, come back into lunar orbit from the surface of the moon, and get you back to Kerbin. That's all it's got room to do. So this is not the stage that's going to take you from Kerbin to the moon. Now, this is just the stage. This is just the stage that's going to take you down to the lunar surface, land you on the moon, get you back into lunar orbit, and get you back in Kerbin. That's all it's going to do. Oh, yeah. This is something you definitely never want to forget, and I was just about to forget it. You do need parachutes, yeah. You're not going to get these guys back if you don't have a parachute. So yeah, always check to make sure that you've actually got parachutes. Because the time when you want to find out that, I've sort of done this before, the time when you want to find out that you haven't put your parachutes on is not when you're entering the atmosphere. That would be a bad thing. Bad call, bad judgment call. I went to Minmus one time, and I somehow screwed up the staging or whatever in such a way as to have the parachutes not work. I mean, this is after going to Minmus. I was recording that. It was one of my first trips to Minmus, right? So it was kind of a big deal. I actually, at that point, I had never actually gone to Minmus before and returned safely. That's how early on this was. So I entered the atmosphere and started hitting the stage key to deploy the parachutes. Realized the parachutes were no longer there. And so that was rather disappointing. So don't do that. Make sure you have parachutes. Now, one of these parachutes should, in theory, be able to carry this whole command module. I always put two. That's just me. Alright. Okay, now we're going to work on the stage that's actually going to take this vessel to lunar orbit and to stop you in lunar orbit. There's a lot of ways you could go about doing this. Let's see. One thing we need to worry about is we're going to need more RCS for this combined ship than we do need for just this. So the RCS port for this one is here. On the combined ship, here's the well, actually, sorry, we haven't put an engine on this, so we're getting ahead of ourselves. Stop getting ahead of yourself, Bob. Okay. We will deal with that in just one moment. Okay, now for the interplanetary leg, there are several ways you could go about it. Nuclear engines have the advantage of being very efficient. They are twice as efficient as non-nuclear engines. They also weigh a lot. But if you're going to use something for your transfer stage, that's a pretty good choice. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to do that. However, as you can see, these engines are pretty tall, and sticking this on here, one, that's not enough thrust because these things only have like 50 or 60 thrust on them. How much thrust? 60. Okay, 60 ain't enough to carry this whole thing to the moon. That's just ridiculous. So, and also, if you even if this would be good enough, actually, technically, I suppose it would be good if you're very patient. But this is a very spindly situation to be sitting on top of your giant moon rocket. So we're not going to do that. We're going to stick these little hard points on here, like so. We're going to find the little tiny fuel tanks. Well, not the tiny, the small fuel tanks, like so. I'm going to pop these puppies on here. Okay. We're going to hook up the fuel connection, and just like what we did up here, we're going to reinforce the hell out of it. These nuclear engines are, one downside to them is that they are noticeably prone to breaking off. So you have to give some consideration to reinforcing them pretty well. And actually we'll put a strut directly to the engine itself. And it would be a good idea to reinforce the connection between this and this. So that's what we're going to do. Is it necessary? Well, I guess my answer to that is the time that you want to find out that it is necessary is not when you're trying to go to the moon. So, better safe than sorry. We need to have that good old Russian boilerplate cast iron space technology going on here. Something that's like the hull of a battleship. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is our moon transfer stage, and that's going to get us from Kerbin orbit to the moon. Now it's going to get us there more slowly than if these were like normal rocket engines like these bad boys. You have to allow more time for the burn, but it will work, and it will be much more fuel efficient. In fact, you'll get to the moon and be able to use these engines to start your descent to the moon, actually. Okay. Okay. And we're going to do a very similar thing with this stage. What is this stage? Typically speaking, all right, let's say you're just about into orbit. You just need to finish up a few things, right? If you have, well, okay, I'm still getting ahead of myself. Damn it. Okay, now let's think about this thing as a total ship, right? It has a center of mass right about here. If you want to have this thing be maximally controllable, you're probably going to need to have another RCS thruster block. And since that one's about up there, you want to have this one right about down here. Again, you want to go with a four-sided symmetry. Okay. Now, this unit as a total package is going to be fairly stable because it's got your RCS blocks equidistant from each other around the center of mass. Okay, now let's get on to the next stage. Do you need to have these many stages on your moon rocket? No, you don't. But the thing is, If you're the larger your stage is, the more difficult it is to maneuver. And if you're carrying around a whole lot of empty tanks, and you're not being able to steer the Manatee at all practically, you're having to waste a lot of RCS fuel to steer it. That's a bad thing. That's not a thing you want. For the parts that are going to go to orbit and beyond, you want to be carrying as little dead weight as possible. Okay, now we're going to do this stage quite similar to the way we did the other one, except it's going to have oopsies. It's going to have more regular engines on it. Okay. And this stage is to finish up your orbit. Now we're going to have 3 of the vectoring engines on there. So when basically your first stages drop, you're not quite to orbit, this is where this kicks in. It's going to finish you up to orbit and deliver this package to orbit. And that's what you want. Again, you probably could make a rocket that would not have this stage, but that could mean that you're having to do a lot of maneuvers with a very bulky, unwieldy rocket. That's a bad thing. Now here's a question. Could I simply add another fuel tank to this one and do without this stage altogether? Yes, I could. The problem is that the thrust on these engines is not so great. So if I'm trying to finish out my orbit, trying to circularize my orbit, it's going to be a little bit more tricky to do it with these engines because they just simply don't have that much thrust. This stage is going to have more than enough thrust to get this whole package the rest of the way into orbit. I could probably go with 6 of these and dispense with this stage altogether. And just add the extra fuel tank. But again, it's going to make the what you're carrying to the moon a little heavier. So screw it. Okay. And we need to again connect up the center fuel tank to the fuel tanks that have the actual engines. Are there a million other ways you could do this particular project? Absolutely. But you need to be thinking about all the factors that come into it. For instance, how you're going to control your moon rocket. How you're going to control what you're sending to the moon. If you have the part of your spacecraft that's going to go to the moon being great big, you're going to have to use RCS to steer it, to get it onto a course. That's going to use up RCS fuel, and that's not very efficient. So you want to be thinking all the time about what situation the ship's going to be in at that particular stage. You know, how steerable is it going to be? Are you going to be able to maneuver the thing without using RCS? RCS runs out. Even though I've got an oodle of RCS here, RCS is not an infinite supply. So you want to try to make sure that your ship is going to be steerable in all the situations and configurations that it finds itself in. So, okay. And if anyone else has better designs for moon rockets, put them out there. This is simply the way I'm going to do it for this tutorial. But it's not necessarily the only or best way to do it. Okay, now we're going to work on the stages that are going to actually get us off the ground and mostly get us to orbit. So, okay. Now the thing with these tanks, I don't know if they fixed this yet. They could have fixed it for in .18.4. But if you put this tank with this engine, this engine, it has a tendency to overheat. I don't know why that is. I think it was probably just a bug, but there you go. Actually, we are going to... No, we're not. Okay. This is our core stage. A lot of people make the first stages all have this engine, this mainsail engine. I don't like the mainsail engine. I'll tell you why. Okay, look at the stats here. ISP at sea level. That's how efficient the rocket is at using its fuel when it's at sea level. The ISP at sea level is 280. That sucks. That sucks hard. Look at the ISP at sea level for this one. It's 320. Now that's a very significant damage. This engine right here sucks fuel like a house on fire, and it's very inefficient. However, one thing it is it's really powerful. Most powerful engine you can get. So we are going to have that as our main sustainer stage. This is the only engine of this type we're going to have on this rocket. There are a lot of people who would do something like this. I'll show you. People who would do something of this nature. Bam. Yep. How come you're not working? Uh-oh. Crashing? Why is that not working? I think my KSP is wigging out. Yep. Alright, here we go. Okay. Okay. There are a lot of people who would do a configuration sort of like this, a bunch of these, and a bunch of mainsails, and a bunch more of these, probably. Yeah, like this. Okay. And something like that will get you there. I mean, it will get you there, no question. It's going to be very inefficient in doing so, because these are very inefficient engines, and you simply don't need that much power for these side boosters. The one thing we're using the power for is this central core, and also we need to have at least one vectoring engine in the first stages need to have at least one engine that can gimbal to keep the rocket on a stable course. This is going to be the only engine in the first stages that is going to be like that. Now, what, you may ask, are you going to do for the rest of the engines? Okay. Let me see something right quick. Okay. You can change your symmetry by hitting the X key. You can change it back by hitting, holding down the Shift and hitting X. So we're going to try a symmetry like this. Why are you acting so weird? Eh? Okay. Sometimes KSP just decides it's going to have a little nervous breakdown, and you have to humor it when that happens. Alright, how about I save this? Save. And let's go out. And let's go back. Because it was starting to act real cranky. Okay. What is your problem? Okay. We're just gonna load something at random because KSP is freaking out. Alright, now we're gonna load the Mun Rocket back. What just happened there shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be giving me any problems about attaching this to a side booster, but you know, what the fuck. It happened. Oh, what the hell? No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Alright. That actually worked, sort of. Okay, let's change the symmetry to 4-sided. We may have to go with 3-sided if this winds up being too crowded. As a matter of fact, it will be. It will be too crowded. So we're just going to go with 3-sided symmetry right now. And stop freaking out, please. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, if we don't want to use the mainsail engines for these side boosters, what do we want to use? It's a mystery. Oh, okay, it's locked up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I do not like these mainsail engines for other than just to have one engine per rocket, more or less. But what are what are my alternatives here? I'm going to put 4 of these the regular non-vectoring engines on here instead. Reasons why we're doing that again, these engines are much more efficient than the mainsail engines. They're very considerably more efficient than the mainsail engines. That also has a mass of 1.25, so so that's a total mass of 5 there. This is a total mass of 6, so that's another thing. Now this thing will put out much more power than these 4 together. It will also suck your fuel tanks dry in nothing flat. So this should be sufficient for what we're doing. And it used to let you put these flush. Will it do it now? No. I think that was a change in the recent update, but that should be fine. Okay, there we go. We have our side boosters. We have 3 of our side boosters. We're actually going to scooch this up a little bit. About like that. Well, about like so. Okay. Even though this is not all the boosters we're going to use, we're going to go ahead and strut the hell out of this thing. Again, conservative engineering dictates that you don't find out that you didn't make your stuff strong enough after you've launched. you try to make sure that the rocket is more or less over-engineered for what you need, because finding out it wasn't quite good enough when you're actually heading towards space at great speeds, it's not a responsible attitude as far as rocket science goes. And these struts are pretty lightweight. They're 0.05. They will add up after a while, so they can add up to a non-trivial amount of weight, but it also keeps your spacecraft together, so that's a good thing. Now we're building this right here before your eyes, and when we go to launch it, it could just totally catastrophically fail. That's the way I roll. I I don't edit stuff out for to make it look like I always succeed, because I don't always succeed. Sometimes my rockets blow up. Not very often. I am pretty good at this game, but they do sometimes blow up. So, okay, so now we got it all strutted up and everything. We're going to hold down the Alt key and duplicate this. We'll put 3 more right there. Okay. Now all these bajillion engines all need to be on the same stage. So. Here's 12 more. That's 24. And this one. Okay. Okay. Now we need to pick one of these sets of boosters to be the ones that we drop first. So let's see. All right. So we're going to drop these first. Don't lock up, please. Thank you very much. And we're going to route the fuel from here to this one. So this tank is going to be feeding into this one. This tank is going to be feeding into... I can manage to squeeze in edgewise here. This tank's going to be feeding into these, the core stage. So that means that this tank is going to suck dry first before any of these other ones are even touched, which is what we want. Let's do a little more conservative engineering here. Make sure everything is all tied together real tight. Okay. And that should be fine, I think. Okay, so these will drop first. These will drop first, and these will keep on running until their time to drop comes. So that should be good. And then these will drop. Yep. And the core booster will go on until it drops. These guys will go on until they drop. These guys will go on until they drop. They drop. What the hell is this? Okay, now this part's no bueno. These are the decouplers that are actually holding on our landing legs. So we need to not drop those until we're actually ready to. That would be a bad thing. And finally we have... No, this needs to change. Finally we have this. And then at very last is parachutes. So our staging should be about right. Okay. Now as far as control during flight, we have this vectoring engine here. That's probably going to be good enough. I could put some fins on here. Matter of fact, if this is a square configuration, I would put fins on there. Problem is that if you have 3 or 6 fins, well, not so much 6, but if you have 3 fins, that's not the most stable control situation as possible. So we're just going to do without the fins altogether. And again up here, we could go with only 3 external tanks and 3 landing legs. That's not as stable as 4 though. 5 would just sort of be a luxury, and not really necessary, but your most stable configuration, both as far as landing things go, and as far as if you have some sort of control surfaces go, is to have a 4-sided symmetry. So that's what you want to go with pretty much. Also with RCS ports, the most effective controllable configuration you're going to have is to have a four-sided symmetry on your RCS ports. So you have these that control right, left, up, and down. These that control right, left, forward, and backwards. These control forward and backwards and up and down and so on. So again, four-sided equals good. Four-sided equals stable. Now this is three-sided here, obviously, but in that case it doesn't matter. So it's not a biggie. Okay. And what was I doing? Oh yeah. I'm going to add some more of these struts over here, just for a little added stability. And remember the Journey into Space motto: if it can't be fixed with struts, it can't be fixed. It's locking up. Oh, crapitosis. Okay, my KSP crashed and destroyed almost everything because I hadn't been saving. I've been busy talking, I didn't save. But you may notice the difference here, which is I realized that having 2 of these for each booster was just too much. That's, again, when I was talking about my, when I was doing my rocket design tutorial, I talked about thrust to weight ratio. The thrust to weight ratio was on these boosters with the having 2 of these on here was not good. So I cut that down by 1/4, and so hoping that will be much better now. Also, think about this. Let's suppose that instead of having all these non-vectoring rockets down here, I had 6 of these mainsail rockets. Well, those rockets are thrust vectoring, which means that all 6 of these engines will be wobbling around trying to keep the rocket going straight, which, strangely enough, is not a good thing, because they tend to fight against each other and cause problems. So that's another reason why you would go with this configuration rather than just having a mainsail on each one of these side boosters. Now you can turn the gimbaling off, but if you forget to do that before you launch, you got a problem. So this to me is just simply a better way of doing it all around. So okay, I think we're about ready to launch. Excuse me. Okay. Now what happens, all these engines down here, including the mainsail, are all in this first stage, as are these very important launch stability items. So when I stage here, all these will ignite, these will release. Oh, there is one more thing I need. Okay, but first, to finish my thought, first these 3 boosters, these 3 here, will release after they've drained into the rest of these tanks, and then the next 3 will release. But there's something I didn't put on here, which I'll put on here now, which is this. Okay. And that's on the wrong stage. Okay, I'm going to put Separatrons on these boosters here. Now you might ask yourself, why is Bob putting Separatrons on these boosters and not on these boosters? There is an answer for that. The answer is that when I drop these boosters, I know from previous experience with these kinds of rockets, at the time when I'm going to drop these boosters, the rocket's going to be going straight up. So these things are just going to fall straight off, pretty much. very unlikely to hit the rocket on the way down. Now, when I drop these boosters, that'll be after my gravity turn, which means it'll be tilted over, which means there's a very high likelihood that one or more of these boosters is going to fall on top of the rocket and destroy it. So I need separatrons for these. And because it's a pretty big booster, I'm going with 4 for each booster. But no need to have them on these, because when I drop these, I'll be going straight up. So that's that. Save. Excuse me. My sinuses are going nuts as usual. I think we're about ready to launch. Okay, parachutes, decoupler, these decouplers, this engine, this decoupler, these engines, this decoupler, these engines, this decoupler, and so on. Okay. I apologize, my sinuses are going nuts as usual. Hold on a minute. Okay, I see one thing I forgot. I've got struts connecting these up, but not these. I'm going to go ahead and connect that up. Okay, save and launch. Sorry. Oh, fuck. Fuck. KSP crashed again. Okay, so much for everything being so stable in this new patch. I just had another crash. Fortunately, I saved before that, but we'll try this again. Okay, after multiple mysterious crashes for no apparent reason, we're actually at the launch pad, and we have the original team with us: Bill, Jebediah, and Bob. Now, if I really wanted to be anal about the whole thing, I would have some sort of abort scenario for these guys. But you can play with that on your own time. I'm going to go ahead and get these guys to the moon. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.